The morning sun of Borealis 3 cast long shadows through the crystalline dome of the military academy's combat hall. 3 suns meant 3 sets of shadows, creating a disorienting pattern across the polished floor, where cadets from 20 different civilizations gathered for their mandatory close combat demonstration. Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the crowd, his human frame unremarkable among the diverse assembly of beings. To his left, a Corvanian warrior stretched muscles that could bend steel. To his right, a Silurian cadet calibrated the energy nodes embedded in her forearms. Everyone carried their preferred weapon: plasma blades, neural disruptors, gravity hammers, technological marvels that represented centuries of advancement. Ethan carried nothing. "Where's your weapon, human?" The voice belonged to Commander Thalrix, a Drakari whose reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smirk among his kind. His scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated amusement, though Ethan had learned to read the underlying contempt in those shifting colors. "Still deciding, sir," Ethan replied, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who'd survived too many battlefields to rise to petty provocations. The combat hall thrummed with energy as Instructor Vale, a being of pure light, housed in a humanoid containment suit, floated to the center of the demonstration area. "Today's exercise will showcase each species' approach to close-quarters combat. You will demonstrate not just technique, but the philosophy behind your fighting style." Ethan watched as the first volunteers entered the ring. A pair of Zalathi dancers moved with liquid grace, their monomolecular whips leaving afterimages in the air. They fought like artists, every movement calculated for maximum beauty and efficiency. The crowd applauded politely when one finally tagged the other with a paralyzing strike. Next came the Corvanian demonstration. Kor himself stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing even the reinforced combat platform. His opponent, another of his kind, met him with equal mass and fury. They clashed like tectonic plates, gravity hammers sending shockwaves through the hall's dampening field. It was warfare as geology: slow, inevitable, crushing. "Impressive displays," Thalrix announced, his voice carrying through the hall's acoustic system. "Though I wonder if our human allies have anything to contribute beyond their reputation for endurance." The word dripped with disdain. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, not for their strength or technology, but for their disturbing ability to simply refuse to die. They survived where others perished, endured where others broke. It wasn't respected so much as found unsettling. "Cross," Instructor Vale's synthesized voice rang out. "You're up." Ethan moved toward the platform with measured steps. His opponent had already been selected: Drex, a Drakari warrior from Thalrix's own unit. The reptilian soldier activated his plasma staff, the weapon humming with lethal energy that could cut through most known materials. "Weapon selection?" Vale inquired. Ethan's eyes swept the hall. Weapons lined the walls, everything from traditional blades to experimental prototypes. His gaze lingered on none of them. Instead, he noticed a maintenance drone hovering near the entrance, its cargo bay filled with cleaning supplies. "That," he said, pointing. The hall fell silent. Confusion rippled through the crowd as Ethan walked to the drone and pulled out a standard cleaning implement, a mop with a synthetic handle designed to break down for easy storage. "You cannot be serious," Drex hissed, his scales flushing deep crimson with insult. "This is mockery." "No mockery intended," Ethan replied calmly. He tested the mop's weight, then, with a sharp motion, snapped it across his knee. The handle split with a crack that echoed through the silent hall, leaving him with 2 pieces, one longer, one shorter. He kept the longer piece, about 4 feet of lightweight composite material with a jagged break at one end. Thalrix's scales flared brilliant red. "This human insults our traditions. He has selected his weapon," Vale interrupted. "The match proceeds." Drex activated his plasma staff fully, the energy field extending to its maximum reach. The Drakari were apex predators on their homeworld, evolved for sudden, overwhelming violence. Their combat philosophy reflected this: strike hard. Strike fast, strike final. The signal chimed. Drex lunged with predatory speed. Plasma staff sweeping in a horizontal arc, meant to bisect Ethan at the waist. The human dropped low, not back but forward, inside the weapon's optimal range. The broken mop handle struck Drex's forward knee with surgical precision. The Drakari's leg buckled. As he compensated, shifting weight to his rear leg, Ethan was already moving. The jagged end of the handle found the soft spot where Drex's chest scales met his throat protection. Not a killing blow. The human pulled it at the last second, but enough to trigger the combat suit's safety protocols. "Match," Vale announced. 8.3 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan helped Drex to his feet. The Drakari warrior, staring at him with something between shock and rage. Around them, the crowd erupted in whispers. 8 seconds. With a broken cleaning tool. Against a trained warrior with a plasma weapon? How Drex managed, his voice rough. "Your species evolved as ambush predators," Ethan said quietly, meant only for Drex's ears. "Quick, decisive strikes. But humans. We evolved as persistence hunters. We learned to read patterns, exploit weaknesses, use whatever was at hand. Your knee drops a fraction before you commit to a full lunge. Your scales flare at the throat when you're about to strike. Small things, but enough." He handed the broken mop handle to Drex. "Keep it. A reminder that the weapon matters less than the mind that wields it." As Ethan walked back to his position, he passed Thalrix. The commander's scales had shifted to a pattern he'd never seen before, something between fury and calculation. "Luck," Thalrix spat. "Nothing more than luck." Ethan met his gaze steadily. "If you say so, sir." The rest of the demonstrations continued, but the energy in the hall had shifted. Cadets whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the human who'd turned a mop handle into a weapon. Some tried to hide their attempts to snap their own training weapons, testing the breakpoints. Lyra, a semi-synthetic cadet whose biosynthetic skin could process emotions as color patterns, had watched the entire display with growing fascination. Her skin cycled through shades of curiosity, deep purples and gold that drew patterns across her face like living art. She'd studied human combat history as part of her tactical analysis courses, but seeing it in practice was entirely different. "That was unexpected," she said, approaching Ethan as the crowd began to disperse. "Was it?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "The first rule of human combat is that there are no rules, only survival." "The way you moved, though, like you'd done it before." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, a shadow of memory quickly suppressed. "We all have our histories, Lyra." She tilted her head, skin shifting to patterns of concern mixed with intrigue. "Most histories don't involve turning cleaning supplies into weapons. Most soldiers would have chosen something more conventional. Conventional weapons create conventional expectations," Ethan replied. "In real combat, you don't always get to choose your tools. Sometimes you're in a ship corridor with nothing but maintenance equipment. Sometimes you're on a planet where the high-tech gear fails, but the local flora is sturdy enough to make a club. Adaptability is survival." "Is that what they taught you in human military?" "No," Ethan said softly. "That's what staying alive taught me." Before Lyra could respond, alarms began blaring through the academy. Not the standard drill alerts, these were different, urgent, real. "All cadets to defensive positions." Vale's voice echoed through the halls. "This is not a drill. Hostile ships detected in system. Report to combat stations immediately." The crowd scattered, racing to their assigned positions. But Ethan noticed something others missed in their rush. Thalrix wasn't moving toward his command post. Instead, the Drakari commander was speaking rapidly into a private communicator. his scales flickering in patterns that looked almost like satisfaction. Cross Core's massive form appeared beside him. "You're assigned to Sector 5. We need to—" "Wait." Ethan held up a hand, still watching Thalrix. "Something's wrong." "Everything's wrong. We're under attack." "No," Ethan said slowly. "We're not under attack. We're being tested." As if to confirm his words, the alarms cut out abruptly. The lighting in the hall shifted to amber simulation mode. Through the transparent dome overhead, the hostile ships flickered and vanished, revealed as holographic projections. "Simulation complete," Vale announced. "Stand down from combat stations." The cadets began filtering back, confusion evident on faces of every species. But Ethan kept his eyes on Thalrix, who was now looking directly at him with an expression that promised this was far from over. "Interesting response time," Vale continued. "However, I'm disappointed that none of you question the nature of the threat. In real combat, things are rarely what they seem." Dismissed. As the crowd dispersed, Lyra fell into step beside Ethan. "You knew it was a simulation." "I suspected." "How?" Ethan glanced back at where Thalrix had been standing. The commander was gone. "Because someone wanted to see how we'd react under pressure, how I'd react. The demonstration wasn't enough for them." "Them?" "Thalrix isn't the type to let a humiliation stand," Ethan said. "He'll want to prove that what happened was a fluke, that humans are exactly what he believes us to be: weak, primitive, lucky." Lyra's skin shifted to patterns of worry. "You think he'll challenge you directly?" "No, he's too smart for that. He'll find another way. Someone like him always does." They walked in silence for a moment before Lyra spoke again. "Can I ask you something? The way you fought Drex, it wasn't just training. You've been in real combat, close combat." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes." "Against Drakari." The question hung between them like a blade. Ethan's pace didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a tightening that spoke of old wounds. "Among others," he said finally. "Is that why you're here at the academy?" Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. For a moment, his carefully maintained mask slipped, and she saw something raw underneath: pain, loss, and something darker. Purpose, maybe, or revenge. "I'm here because the Academy teaches the best fighters in the galaxy," he said. "And because sometimes the best way to prevent future wars is to understand those who might start them." It wasn't a lie, exactly. But Lyra's skin rippled with patterns that suggested she knew it wasn't the whole truth either. "The mop handle," she said suddenly. "It wasn't really about adaptability, was it?" Ethan almost smiled. "What makes you say that?" "Because you could have chosen any improvised weapon. A chair leg, a piece of the wall paneling, even your boot. But you chose something that would humiliate, something that would send a message. And what message would that be? That you're dangerous, that you're unpredictable, that underestimating humans is a mistake." She paused. "And maybe that you wanted someone specific to get that message." This time, Ethan did smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You're perceptive. That's a dangerous quality in a place like this. So is turning mop handles into weapons. Apparently, touché." They reached the dormitory junction where their paths diverged. Lyra to the synthetic quarters designed for her unique physiology. Ethan to the human-compatible section. But she hesitated before leaving. "Whatever your real reason for being here," she said, her skin cycling through patterns of determination. "You should know that not everyone shares Thalrix's views. Some of us see strength in more than just technology and breeding." "Careful, Lyra. That sounds dangerously close to respect for primitive human ways." "Maybe it is," she admitted. "Maybe that's exactly what this academy needs. A reminder that evolution isn't always about who has the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. Sometimes It's about who's willing to do whatever it takes to survive. She left before he could respond, but her words lingered in the empty corridor. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, absently rubbing his left shoulder, where old scar tissue ached, a souvenir from a Drakari plasma blade that had almost ended his story years ago. In his quarters, Ethan found a message waiting on his personal terminal. Text only. No sender identification, but he recognized the style immediately. Thalrix. Impressive display today. Human. But parlor tricks won't save you when real combat comes. I know what you are. I know why you're here. And I know what you've lost. Consider today a warning. Stay in your place, or I'll remind everyone why humans needed rescue from their own planet in the first place. Ethan read the message twice, then deleted it. He sat on his narrow bunk, pulling out a small holoframe from his footlocker. The image it projected showed three people himself, younger and unscarred, standing with a woman and a small girl. They were laughing at something beyond the frame's view, frozen in a moment of happiness that seemed to belong to another lifetime. Because it did. The attack on Colony Sigma-7 had been swift and brutal. Drakari raiders, officially disavowed by their government but suspiciously well-equipped, had torn through the human settlement like a plasma blade through paper. Ethan had been off-world, returning to find only ashes and official condolences. The investigation had been perfunctory. Border disputes happened. Pirates existed. These things were tragic but unavoidable in the vast reaches of space. No one wanted to risk diplomatic incidents over a few dozen human casualties. But Ethan had investigated on his own. He'd followed trails of evidence that led to uncomfortable truths. The raiders hadn't been random pirates. They'd been testing new weapons, new tactics, and their commander had been a rising military star named Thalrix, field testing his theories about human weakness. The Academy represented Ethan's best chance to get close to him, to learn his patterns, his weaknesses, to find proof that even the Galactic Alliance couldn't ignore, to get justice or revenge. Some days, Ethan wasn't sure he knew the difference anymore. A chime from his door interrupted his thoughts. He secured the holoframe and opened it to find Kor standing in the hallway, having to duck slightly to fit under the human-sized doorframe. "Cross," the massive warrior rumbled. "Heard about your performance today. 8 seconds with a cleaning stick. Impressive." "Lucky," Ethan corrected, echoing Thalrix's words. Kor's laugh sounded like boulders tumbling down a mountain. "Luck is what losers call skill they don't understand. I've seen lucky. That wasn't it." "What can I do for you, Kor?" The Corvanian shifted, suddenly seeming almost embarrassed despite his imposing size. "Wanted to ask, could you teach me the way you moved, reading the opponent like that? My people rely on strength, but strength isn't always enough." Ethan studied him, surprised. Kor had seemed the type to trust only in raw power. "Why the sudden interest?" "Because I'm not stupid," Kor said bluntly. "War is changing. The old ways. The honorable ways, they're becoming obsolete. If a human with a mop handle can defeat a Drakari with a plasma staff, then maybe it's time I learned to think differently." "It's not just about thinking differently," Ethan warned. "It's about being willing to do things others might consider dishonorable. Like using a mop as a weapon. Like using whatever it takes to win. Even if it means fighting dirty. Even if it means becoming something you're not proud of." Kor considered this, then nodded slowly. Sometimes, survival requires sacrifice. Even the sacrifice of who we think we are. Tomorrow, Ethan decided. So 500 auxiliary gym. We'll start with the basics. After Kor left, Ethan returned to his bunk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests from Thalrix, new steps in a dance that could only end one way. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mop handle had done its job, not just defeating Drex, but sending a message that rippled through the Academy. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were not weak. They were not prey. And most importantly, it had shown Thalrix that Ethan Cross was not just another human survivor grateful for alien charity. He was a warrior who'd learned to turn anything into a weapon. Even grief, even rage, even a broken mop handle. The three suns of Borealis 3 set in sequence, painting the sky in layers of color that no human world had ever seen. But Ethan didn't watch the sunset. Instead, he sat in darkness, planning his next move in a game where the stakes were nothing less than everything he'd already lost. Somewhere in the academy, word was spreading. The human had broken a mop handle in half and defeated a Drakari warrior in 8 seconds. By morning, it would be legend. By morning, everything would begin to change. The auxiliary gym at 0500 was a cathedral of shadows. Ethan arrived to find Kor already there, the massive Corvanian practicing slow movements that looked almost meditative despite his bulk. "You're early," Ethan observed. "Couldn't sleep," Kor admitted. "Kept thinking about yesterday. How someone a third my size took down Drex like he was a training dummy. Size is just one factor. Often, it's a liability." Ethan moved to the center of the training mat. First lesson: forget everything you know about honorable combat. Honor gets you killed. For the next hour, Ethan deconstructed Kor's fighting style with surgical precision. Every time the giant warrior telegraphed a move, Ethan exploited it. Every time Kor relied on strength, Ethan redirected it. By the end, the Corvanian was breathing hard, more from frustration than exertion. "This is impossible," Kor growled. "You move like smoke, like you know what I'm going to do before I do it." "Because I do," Ethan said simply. "Your species evolved in low-gravity environments where momentum was king. Every movement you make commits you to a path. I just have to see where that path leads and make sure I'm not there when you arrive." "Show me the mop technique." Ethan shook his head. The mop was just a tool. The technique is older than spaceflight. Humans call it improvised combat. It means using your environment as a weapon. He walked to the gym's equipment rack, but instead of selecting a practice weapon, he grabbed a towel. "Attack me!" Kor hesitated. "With a towel, you can't be—" The towel snapped out like a whip, catching Kor across the eyes. As the giant flinched, Ethan had already moved, looping the towel around Kor's forward leg and pulling. The Corvanian toppled like a felled tree. "Anything can be a weapon," Ethan said, helping Kor up. "A towel, a piece of wire, even your enemy's overconfidence. That's what made the mop handle effective. Not the stick itself, but what it represented: the unexpected." "The newscasts are calling it the mop handle incident," Kor said, brushing himself off. "Half the academy tried to recreate it yesterday. 3 cadets in medical with self-inflicted injuries. They're missing the point." "What point?" Ethan retrieved 2 training sticks from the rack, keeping one and tossing the other to Kor. "That winning isn't about the weapon. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves." Drex lost the moment he let his pride cloud his judgment. The mop handle just made it obvious. They sparred for another hour. Ethan gradually teaching Kor to recognize patterns, to use an opponent's strength against them. The Corvanian was a surprisingly quick study once he abandoned his preconceptions about proper combat. "Who taught you this?" Kor asked during a water break. "Necessity," Ethan replied. "When your species is physically inferior to almost every other spacefaring race, you learn to compensate. We can't match a Drakari's speed, a Corvanian's strength, or a Zalathi's grace. But we can outlast you all. We can adapt faster. And we can do things you'd never expect because you'd never lower yourself to try them. Like breaking a mop handle in half." "Exactly." The gym door hissed open, revealing Lyra. Her biosynthetic skin showed patterns of concern mixed with curiosity, swirling blues and golds that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "Ethan, there's something you need to see." She led them to the Academy's common area, where a crowd had gathered around the holo displays. The newsfeed showed a familiar scene, yesterday's combat demonstration, but from angles Ethan didn't remember any cameras capturing. "Someone leaked the footage," Lyra explained. "It's gone viral across 3 sectors. They're calling you the mop-handle human." The video played on repeat. Ethan snapping the mop. The 8-second defeat. Drex's shocked expression. But what caught Ethan's attention wasn't the footage itself. It was the commentary. Jaw. Raises serious questions about Academy standards. A Drakari military analyst was saying, allowing primitive weapons in a modern combat exercise undermines centuries of martial tradition. "They're trying to spin it," Kor growled. "Make it seem like you cheated." "Let them," Ethan said calmly. "The more they protest, the more people will wonder why they're so threatened by a human with a stick." But Lyra's skin patterns suggested deeper worry. "There's more. Command has issued new regulations, effective immediately. All combat demonstrations must use approved weapons from the standard registry. No improvised tools allowed." "The mop handle ban," someone in the crowd chuckled. Ethan smiled thinly. "They just legitimized it. You don't ban something unless you're afraid of it." Over the next week, the Academy transformed. What had been a single unusual incident became a phenomenon. Despite, or perhaps because of the ban, cadets began experimenting with improvised weapons in secret. The maintenance staff reported a suspicious number of accidentally broken cleaning implements. Ethan found himself an unwilling celebrity. Cadets who had previously ignored the human contingent now watched him with mixture of curiosity and caution. Some, like Kor, sought training. Others, particularly among Thalrix's faction, viewed him as a threat to the established order. "You've started something," Instructor Vale observed during a tactical theory class. The being of pure light had no readable expressions, but something in their voice suggested amusement. "The Academy hasn't seen such disruption in decades." "Disruption wasn't my intent, sir," Ethan replied carefully. "Wasn't it?" Vale's form flickered their equivalent of a raised eyebrow. A human defeating a Drakari warrior with improvised weapons in front of the entire Academy, purely by coincidence. As Commander Thalrix said, "It was just luck." "Indeed. Such remarkable luck that you've had every day this week, defeating challengers from 6 different species using nothing but found objects." It was true. The challenges had come fast and frequent after the ban unofficial bouts that happened in training rooms with conveniently malfunctioning cameras. Ethan had accepted them all, adding to his legend with each victory. A stylus became a pressure point weapon. A belt transformed into a restraint. A cafeteria tray served as both shield and striking surface. "Perhaps," Vale continued, "you would care to demonstrate this luck in a more formal setting. The Academy is hosting joint exercises with the 3rd Fleet next month, a showcase of our finest warriors." "I'm honored, but—" "Commander Thalrix specifically requested your participation," Vale interrupted. "He seems quite eager to prove that your unconventional methods have no place in real combat." Ethan kept his expression neutral. "Then I accept. After class." Lyra fell into step beside him. Her skin patterns had grown more complex around him lately, deeper purples of interest mixed with the silver threads of concern. "You know it's a trap," she said without preamble. "Obviously. And you're walking into it anyway." "Also obviously." She stopped, forcing him to turn back. "Why, what are you trying to prove?" Ethan studied her for a moment. In the weeks since the mop handle incident, she'd become something unexpected, a friend, perhaps. Someone who saw through his carefully maintained facade of the humble soldier. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said finally. "I'm trying to change things." "Change what?" "The way the galaxy sees humans. The way we see ourselves. We've spent so long being grateful for rescue, for inclusion in the galactic community, that we've forgotten what we are. And what are you? Survivors, Ethan said simply. Not because we're strong or fast or technologically advanced, but because we're willing to do whatever it takes. The mop handle wasn't about showing off. It was about reminding everyone, including ourselves, that humans didn't crawl out of the gravity well of a dying planet by playing by the rules. Lyra's patterns shifted to something he hadn't seen before. Respect mixed with something warmer. Even if it makes you enemies. Especially then. Comfortable people don't change. Threatened people do. She reached out, her hand almost touching his arm before she pulled back. Be careful, Ethan. Thalrix isn't just any enemy. There are rumors about him. Black operations. Colonies that oppose Drakari expansion going silent. I know, Ethan said quietly. Too quietly. She studied his face. Her enhanced perception, reading micro-expressions he didn't know he was making. This isn't really about changing perceptions, is it? This is personal. Before he could respond, alarms began wailing through the academy. This time, Ethan recognized the pattern intruder alert. All cadets to defensive positions, Vale's voice echoed through the halls. Confirmed breach in Sector 3. This is not a drill. The academy erupted into controlled chaos. Cadets raced to arm themselves, grabbing weapons from emergency lockers. Ethan noticed many also picked up seemingly mundane objects, fire suppressors, medical tools, anything that could serve as an improvised weapon. His influence was spreading. Sector 3 was the research wing, home to experimental weapons and classified projects. As Ethan's squad approached, they found a scene of destruction. Laboratory doors had been melted through. Security systems fried. Professional job, Core observed, hefting a plasma cannon that looked like a pistol in his massive hands. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit. Ethan studied the blast patterns. Something nagging at him. The angle of entry. The specific labs targeted. It was all too precise. Too convenient. Where's Thalrix? He asked suddenly. Lyra checked her tactical display. Leading the response in Sector 5. Why? Because that's exactly where he'd be if... Ethan's words were cut off by weapons fire from deeper in the complex. Move, but watch for... The ambush came from above. Figures in stealth suits dropped from the ceiling, firing stun weapons that dropped half the squad in seconds. Ethan rolled aside, grabbing a broken piece of lab equipment, part of some exotic scanner that had been destroyed in the breach. The attackers moved with military precision, but something was off. Their weapons were set to stun, not kill. They seemed more interested in hurting the cadets than eliminating them. Ethan spun the scanner fragment like a staff, catching one attacker in the solar plexus. As the figure doubled over, their stealth suit flickered, revealing scaled skin beneath. Drakari, he breathed. The revelation changed everything. These weren't random intruders, they were military, probably special forces, and they were in the academy with enough firepower to level the building, but using non-lethal weapons. It's a test, Ethan shouted to the others. They're not trying to steal anything, they're evaluating us. Core roared in anger, charging the nearest intruder, but Ethan had already seen the trap. Core, no, the floor! Too late. Core's weight triggered a gravity mine hidden under the debris. He floated helplessly as two attackers efficiently stunned him. Predictable, one of the intruders said, voice distorted by their mask, but unmistakably Drakari. The human was right. You rely too much on strength. They turned their weapon on Ethan. Let's see if you're as adaptable as the stories claim. What followed was a deadly dance. Ethan used every dirty trick in his arsenal, thrown debris to obscure vision, spilled chemicals to create hazardous terrain. Even the building's emergency systems turned into weapons. He fought like a cornered animal, which in many ways, he was. But there were too many, and they were too well prepared. Eventually, numbers told. Ethan found himself surrounded, weapons trained on him from every angle. "Surrender," the lead intruder commanded. "You've lost." Ethan slowly raised his hands, still holding the scanner fragment. Then he smiled. "Have I?" He pressed a hidden control on the fragment. Every piece of electronic equipment in the room suddenly screamed to life scanners, analyzers, even the lighting systems creating a cacophony of interference that overwhelmed the intruder's helmet sensors. In the confusion, Ethan moved. Not toward the exit, but toward the lab's emergency containment system. He slammed his fist into the activation panel. "Contamination detected," the automated voice announced. "Emergency lockdown initiated." Blast doors slammed shut, trapping everyone inside. The intruders looked around in alarm as decontamination protocols activated, harmless to most species, but extremely uncomfortable for Drakari, whose scales were sensitive to the particular radiation used. "You just trapped yourself with us," the lead intruder said, though his voice now held a note of uncertainty. "No," Ethan corrected. "I trapped you with me, and unlike you, I don't need functioning equipment to fight." The next few minutes were brutal. In the confined space, with their electronic advantages neutralized and their scales burning from the decontamination rays, the intruders found themselves facing something their training hadn't prepared them for: a human who fought without rules, without honor, without any concern for his own safety. When security finally breached the lockdown, they found Ethan standing among 6 unconscious intruders, bleeding from multiple wounds, but still upright. The scanner fragment in his hand had been worn down to a nub from repeated impacts. "Cadets," he said calmly to the security team, swaying slightly, "participating in an unauthorized training exercise." Later, in the medical bay, the truth came out. The intruders were indeed Drakari Special Forces, invited by Thalrix to test the Academy's readiness. The fact that a human cadet had not only seen through the deception, but turned it into a trap of his own, sent shockwaves through the command structure. 23 cadets were eliminated in the exercise, Vale informed him during the debriefing. "You were one of only 3 to successfully resist capture. The only one to capture attackers in return." "Lucky," Ethan said, echoing his usual response. That word again. Vale's form pulsed with what might have been frustration. "At what point does luck become skill? Cross." "When people stop underestimating humans, sir." Vale considered this. "The Third Fleet exercises next month. Commander Thalrix has requested a special demonstration. Close quarters combat, but with a twist. Each participant may choose any weapon from their species' history. No restrictions. Trying to stack the deck? Undoubtedly, the Drakari have millennia of weapons development to draw from. What will you choose? Cross another mop handle?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking. "No, sir. I think it's time to show them what human history really looks like." As Vale left, Lyra entered, her skin showing patterns of relief mixed with anger. "You absolute idiot! You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." "That's not the point." Her patterns flared brighter. "You're painting a target on your back. Every species that prides itself on military superiority is going to want to prove you're a fraud." "Good." "Good, Ethan. This isn't a game. People are starting to talk about you like you're some kind of symbol. The human who breaks the rules. The primitive who beats the advanced. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I know exactly how dangerous it is. But it's necessary." "Why?" She sat on the edge of his medical bed, closer than professional distance dictated. "What aren't you telling me?" Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. In the weeks since they'd met, she'd become something he hadn't expected to find at the Academy. Not just an ally, but someone who saw through his masks without flinching at what lay beneath. "The galaxy sees humans as charity cases," he said finally. "Rescued from our dying world, Given technology we couldn't develop ourselves, tolerated because we're useful in small ways. But that narrative is wrong. How? We didn't need rescue. We were adapting. Slowly. Painfully. But adapting. The climate disasters. The resource wars. The population collapses, we were surviving them all. Not pretty survival. Not noble. But survival nonetheless. Then the Drakari arrived. Lyra's patterns shifted to confusion. The historical records say it was a joint effort. Multiple species working together to save humanity. The official records say that. Ethan agreed. But I've seen the classified files. The Drakari were first. They saw a species on the brink and made a calculation: save us now, while we're grateful and weak, or risk us becoming something unpredictable later. That's not possible. The Senate would never. The Senate ratified what was already done. By the time other species arrived, the Drakari had already established themselves as our saviors, set the terms of our integration, decided which humans were worth saving and which weren't. His voice had gone cold, and Lyra saw something in his eyes that made her patterns ripple with alarm. "Ethan, what happened to you?" "Colony Sigma-7, he said simply. "My wife. My daughter. 300 other humans who had the audacity to succeed without Drakari oversight. Labeled a failed settlement after raiders conveniently eliminated all witnesses. The pirates weren't pirates. They were Drakari special forces testing new suppression techniques. Led by an ambitious commander who believed humans needed periodic reminders of their place." He met her eyes. "Led by Thalrix." The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of healing fields. Lyra's patterns cycled through shock, horror, and finally, understanding. The mop handle, the challenges, everything you're building to something. "I can't prove what he did through official channels. The evidence is buried too deep. But I can do something else. I can make him reveal himself. Make him show the galaxy what Drakari really think of humans when we stop being grateful victims." "He'll kill you." "Maybe. But he'll have to do it in front of everyone. And that will say more than any investigation ever could." Lyra stood abruptly, her patterns now showing resolution mixed with fear. "Then, you're going to need more than dirty tricks and improvised weapons. You're going to need allies." "I don't want anyone else involved. This is my fight." "Too late," she interrupted. "You started something bigger than your personal vendetta. Ethan Cross. Half the Academy is practicing with improvised weapons. Cadets from species who've been looked down on for centuries are seeing that maybe, just maybe, technological superiority isn't everything. You don't get to put that genie back in the bottle." She headed for the door, then paused. "The Third Fleet exercises. Whatever you're planning, you won't be doing it alone. Some of us believe in what you represent, even if you only see it as a means to an end." After she left, Ethan lay back in the medical bed, staring at the ceiling. The game was escalating faster than he'd planned. What had started as a personal mission of revenge was becoming something larger, more dangerous. Outside his window, the three suns of Borealis 3 painted the sky in impossible colors. Somewhere in the Academy, cadets were breaking mop handles, learning that strength came in many forms. And somewhere else, Thalrix was planning his next move. The instructor had asked for a close combat demo. Before this was over, he would get one that would echo through history. But first, Ethan had to survive long enough to deliver it. The grand amphitheater of Borealis 3 had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from 20 worlds filled the tiered seating that rose like cliff faces around the combat arena. The Third Fleet exercises had drawn admirals, generals, and military observers from across the Galactic Alliance, all eager to witness the Academy's finest warriors demonstrate the martial prowess of their species. Ethan stood in the preparation chamber, studying the weapon he'd chosen from humanity's history. It wasn't impressive to look at a simple hardwood staff, 6 feet long, worn smooth by countless hands. No energy fields, no molecular edges, no technological enhancements whatsoever. "Oh, walking stick," Core asked, examining the weapon with confusion. "This is what humans used to conquer." "Humans never conquered," Ethan replied, testing the staff's balance. "We survived. This is a quarterstaff. For thousands of years. It was the weapon of farmers, travelers, monks, people who couldn't afford swords or armor, but still needed to defend themselves. Against what? Usually each other." Ethan spun the staff in a simple pattern, muscle memory from hours of practice returning. "That's the thing about human history. We spent more time fighting ourselves than any external threat. It made us adaptable." Lyra entered the chamber, her biosynthetic skin displaying patterns of deep concern mixed with determination. "The matchings have been announced. You're in the third demonstration. Let me guess, Thalrix arranged something special." "Serax," she said quietly. "The Drakari champion. Enhanced cybernetic augmentation. Veteran of 16 military campaigns." Core whistled low. "Serax the Render. I've seen footage of his battles. He doesn't just defeat opponents, he destroys them." "Good," Ethan said calmly. "The bigger the reputation, the harder the fall." "This isn't like the Academy matches," Lyra warned. "Third Fleet rules allow for lethal force. Medical teams are standing by. But if Serax decides to kill you, no one will stop him." "He won't kill me." "You sound very sure." "I am. Thalrix doesn't want me dead, not yet. He wants me humiliated, broken, proven inferior in front of the entire Alliance military hierarchy." Ethan met her eyes. "Death would make me a martyr. Defeat makes me a joke." The preparation chamber's walls displayed feeds from the arena as the demonstrations began. First came the Zalathi, their molecular whips creating patterns of deadly beauty as two masters dueled. The crowd applauded politely at the technical skill, the artistic precision. Next were the Corvanians, including Core's older brother, wielding gravity hammers that could pulverize stone. Their battle shook the arena floor, raw power that drew gasps from the audience. "Traditional strength against strength," Ethan observed. "Exactly what everyone expects." Then came his turn. The walk to the arena seemed both endless and too short. The crowd's murmur followed him, the human with the stick, the primitive who'd somehow defeated superior opponents with cleaning supplies and improvised weapons. Some watched with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. Serax waited in the arena's center, where most Drakari stood 7 feet tall. He reached nearly 9, his body a fusion of scaled flesh and cybernetic enhancement. His weapon was a work of art, a plasma glaive that could extend or retract its energy blade at will, connected to his neural implants for perfect response time. "I've heard of you, human." Serax's voice was artificially modulated. Another enhancement. The mop-handle warrior, the one who fights without honor. "Honor is a luxury," Ethan replied, taking his position. "Survival is a necessity." Instructor Vale floated between them, their light form pulsing with formal cadence. "This demonstration will showcase close-quarters combat techniques from your respective species' histories. Victory conditions are submission, incapacitation, or a pause. Death. Do the combatants understand?" "Understood," Serax hissed. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "Begin." Serax moved faster than any being his size should have been able to. The plasma glaive swept through the air where Ethan had been standing, leaving ionized trails that made the atmosphere crackle. But Ethan had already dropped low, the quarterstaff sweeping for Serax's legs. The Drakari leaped, impossibly agile, the glaive reversing direction mid-air. Ethan rolled aside, came up spinning, the staff deflecting a strike that would have bisected him. "Impressive reflexes," Serax acknowledged. "But you only delay the inevitable." The battle escalated quickly. Serax's cybernetic enhancements allowed him to process combat data in real time, predicting and countering conventional attacks. His plasma glaive could cut through nearly anything, making traditional blocks suicidal. But Ethan wasn't fighting traditionally. He used the staff's length to maintain distance, never meeting the plasma blade directly, but redirecting its path. When Serax advanced, Ethan retreated. When the Drakari overextended, the human struck not at his opponent, but at the arena floor, sending fragments of stone into Serax's optical implants. "Dirty tricks," Serax snarled, his vision momentarily impaired. "Effective tricks," Ethan corrected, already moving. The crowd watched in fascination as the battle evolved into something unexpected. This wasn't the clean, honorable combat they were accustomed to. Ethan fought like a scavenger, using every element of the environment. He kicked sand, created obstacles from debris, even used Serax's own shadow to mask his movements. "Fight me properly," Serax roared, frustration building as another predicted strike found empty air. "I am fighting you properly," Ethan replied. "Just not your way." That's when everything changed. Serax's cybernetic eye flashed, and his entire demeanor shifted. The calculated strikes became savage. The controlled advances turned predatory. This wasn't demonstration anymore. This was hunting. "You think you're clever, human." Serax's voice had lost its artificial modulation, revealing something raw underneath. "You think your tricks matter. I was at Colony Sigma 7. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. For the first time in the match, he hesitated. "Ah, that got your attention." Serax pressed his advantage, the plasma glaive forcing Ethan back. "Yes, I remember. The colony that thought it could thrive without proper oversight. Your mate fought well, for a human. Your offspring, less so." The arena seemed to narrow to a tunnel. The crowd, the observers. Everything faded except for Serax's words and the memories they dragged to the surface. Sarah's face, Maya's laugh, the smell of smoke and ozone as orbital bombardment turned paradise into ash. Commander Thalrix was quite specific, Serax continued, each word timed with a strike that drove Ethan further back. "Make examples. Show the cost of defiance. Your family was educational." The quarterstaff in Ethan's hands no longer felt like wood. It felt like rage given form. When he moved again, it was different. The calculated defensive fighter was gone, replaced by something primal. The staff struck like lightning knee, elbow, throat, temple a barrage that caught Serax completely off guard. "There it is," Serax laughed, even as he stumbled back. "The real human. Not the evolved diplomat, but the killer underneath." But Ethan had already seen the trap. Serax wanted him emotional, uncontrolled. The Drakari's cybernetics were recording everything, analyzing the patterns of his rage. In seconds, he would have a perfect counter-strategy. So Ethan did the unexpected. He stopped. In the middle of his assault, with every advantage of momentum, he simply stepped back and planted the quarterstaff in the arena floor. "You're right," he said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I am a killer. We all are. We humans. It's why your people saved us, not from extinction, but from evolution. Because you saw what we were becoming." Serax hesitated, thrown by the shift. "Philosophical acceptance of defeat. How unlike your reputation." "Not philosophy. History." Ethan pulled the quarterstaff from the ground, but held it loosely, almost casually. "Do you know why humans develop so many weapons? Serax. Why we have thousands of ways to kill when most species perfected just a few? Your savage nature." "Our diversity," Ethan interrupted. "Every human culture, every isolated group, develop their own methods of survival. The quarterstaff alone has 100 different fighting styles. Your cybernetics can analyze patterns, but only the ones I show you. Understanding flickered in Serax's organic eye. You were holding back. I was fighting Drakari style, direct, aggressive, predictable. Want to see human style? Serax raised his plasma glaive. Show me. What followed was a lesson in controlled chaos. Ethan switched fighting styles mid-strike, flowing from Japanese bojutsu to Irish batariact to African staff fighting, sometimes in the span of a single combination. The quarterstaff became a dozen different weapons: spear, club, lever, whip, transforming with each grip change. Serax's cybernetics, programmed to recognize and counter established patterns, began to overload. Warning indicators flashed across his artificial vision as the combat algorithms failed to find consistency in Ethan's movements. Impossible, Serax hissed, falling back. No one fights like this. There's no structure, no school. That's the point. Ethan pressed forward, the staff a blur of motion. Humans don't fight. We survive. And survival has no rules. The end came suddenly. Serax, his enhanced reflexes betrayed by conflicting data, moved a fraction too slow. The quarterstaff found the gap where his cybernetic spine met organic tissue. Not a killing blow. Ethan pulled it at the last instant, but enough to trigger a system shutdown. Serax collapsed, his cybernetics sparking as emergency protocols engaged. The arena fell silent. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came slow applause. Others joined in, uncertain at first, then with growing enthusiasm. They had witnessed something unprecedented, not just a victory, but a demonstration that challenged everything they thought they knew about combat superiority. Ethan helped Serax to his feet as medical teams rushed in. The Drakari warrior stared at him with his one organic eye, cybernetic systems still rebooting. You could have killed me, Serax said. When I mentioned your family, you wanted to. Yes. Why didn't you? Ethan looked past him to where Thalric sat in the observation box, the commander's scales flickering through patterns of rage and calculation. Because killing you would have been simple revenge, Ethan said, loud enough for the recording systems to catch. Defeating you proves something more important: that your technology, your enhancements, your assumptions of superiority, they all fail against one thing. What? The human willingness to do whatever it takes to survive, even spare an enemy who doesn't deserve it. Medical teams led Serax away, but not before he spoke one last time, his voice low and urgent. Be careful, human. What happened at Sigma-7? There's more to it than you know, more than even Thalrix knows. Before Ethan could respond, Serax was gone, leaving only questions behind. The remaining demonstrations passed in a blur. Other species showcased their martial traditions, but the conversation in the stands kept returning to the human with the stick who'd defeated one of the Drakari's most decorated warriors. In the preparation chamber afterward, Ethan found unexpected visitors. A delegation of officers from species often considered minor in the Alliance hierarchy: Volans, with their hollow bones, Threnodi, with their pacifist reputation, even a few sapiens from the newer colonies. That display, one of them said, of Volans whose feathers rustled with excitement. You showed that raw power isn't everything, that there are other forms of strength. I showed that survival trumps superiority, Ethan corrected. Nothing more. Perhaps, another said, a Threnodi whose natural bioluminescence pulsed with thought. But in doing so, you've given us something we've lacked. What? Hope. They left before he could respond, but their words lingered. Ethan had started this journey for personal revenge, but something larger was building around him. The mop handle had become a symbol, and symbols had power beyond any individual's control. Lyra found him later, sitting alone in the chamber, the quarterstaff across his knees. Serax is stable, she reported. His cybernetics will need replacement, but he'll recover. Good. She sat beside him, her skin patterns more subdued than usual. What he said about your family was true. Ethan's hands tightened on the staff. Every word. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your burden to carry. Maybe not, she said softly. But you don't have to carry it alone either. They sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. Thalrix has called for a special assembly tomorrow. Something about addressing the dangerous precedent set by today's demonstration. Let him talk. Words won't change what happened here. No, but they might change what happens next. She turned to face him fully. Ethan, you've started something. The way those officers looked at you, the way the crowd reacted, this isn't just about your revenge anymore. I know. Do you? Because Thalrix knows it too. He's not going to let this stand, whatever he's planning. We'll reveal him for what he is. Ethan finished. Every move he makes to suppress this just proves the point. The powerful only respect power. When the powerless find strength in unexpected places, the response tells you everything about who really believes in the Alliance's ideals of equality. Lyra's patterns shifted to something he'd never seen before, a deep gold threaded with silver, beautiful and sad at once. When this is over, if you survive whatever Thalrix is planning, what then? I don't know, Ethan admitted. I've spent so long focused on justice for Sarah and Maya that I never thought about after. Maybe it's time you did. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. That thing Serac said, about there being more to Sigma-7. You should look into it.
Why?
Because in my experience, when someone takes a neural disruptor to share a warning, it's usually worth hearing. After she left, Ethan remained in the chamber, turning Serac's words over in his mind. More to Sigma-7 than even Thalrix knew. What could that mean? But those were questions for tomorrow. Tonight, he had proven something important, that humans weren't just survivors clinging to the Alliance's charity. They were adapters, innovators, warriors who could turn anything into victory. The instructor had asked for a close combat demo. Today, Ethan had given them one that would reshape how the galaxy saw humanity. Tomorrow, Thalrix would respond, and when he did, the real game would begin. Outside, the three suns of Borealis 3 set in their eternal sequence, painting the sky in colors no human had seen before coming to the stars. But Ethan didn't watch them. Instead, he practiced with the quarterstaff, flowing through forms that were older than spaceflight, preparing for a battle that would determine more than just his personal revenge. Because Lyra was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. The assembly hall could hold 5,000 beings, and every seat was filled. Word of yesterday's demonstration had spread through the academy like wildfire, and Thalrix's emergency assembly had drawn attendees from across all divisions. Even maintenance staff had found reasons to be present, clustering near the exits where they wouldn't be noticed. Ethan stood with the other human cadets, acutely aware of the space that had formed around him. Not from fear, exactly, but from something more complex, respect mixed with uncertainty. He'd become something none of them had expected, a human who didn't just survive, but dominated. You've caused quite the disruption, Instructor Vale observed, floating near the human section. Their light form pulsed with what might have been amusement. Commander Thalrix spent the entire night in conference with the Drakari military attaché. Concerned about one human with a stick? Concerned about what that human represents? Ideas, cross, are far more dangerous than weapons. The lights dimmed as Thalrix took the central platform. The Drakari commander had eschewed his dress uniform for full combat armor, a deliberate choice that sent its own message. His scales rippled with controlled patterns, authority mixed with barely contained aggression. Cadets of the Allied Military Academy. His voice boomed through the hall's acoustics. Yesterday, You witnessed what some are calling a remarkable display of combat prowess. I call it something else, a dangerous deviation from the principles that have maintained galactic peace for centuries. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Beside Ethan, Kor growled low in his throat. Here it comes. The human method, Thalrix continued, his gaze finding Ethan in the crowd, relies on unpredictability, on abandoning the honor codes that separate us from beasts. It celebrates chaos over order, survival over dignity. Is this what we want to teach our warriors, to fight like cornered animals, rather than civilized beings? Seemed pretty effective to me, someone called out a Volan's cadet, whose feathers rustled with defiance. Thalrix's scales flared. Effectiveness without ethics is the path to barbarism. The galaxy learned this lesson through millennia of war. We developed codes of combat precisely to prevent the kind of unrestricted warfare that humans seem so eager to embrace. Because your codes benefit the powerful, Ethan said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. Every head turned toward him. Thalrix's scales shifted to a pattern Ethan had learned to recognize: anticipation. He'd been waiting for this. Cadet Cross, Thalrix said with false courtesy. Would you care to elaborate? Ethan moved toward the platform, the crowd parting before him. Combat codes, honor systems, regulated warfare, they all favor species with natural advantages or advanced technology. When you restrict how people can fight, you ensure that the strong stay strong and the weak stay weak. You call structure oppression. I call it control. Ethan reached the platform's edge, but didn't ascend, a calculated choice that forced Thalrix to look down at him. The Drakari have plasma resistance in their scales, natural weapons in their claws, superior speed and strength. Of course you favor honorable combat. It plays to every advantage you possess. And humans have, what, the ability to fight dirty? The ability to adapt, to see a weapon in anything, to survive when survival should be impossible. Ethan's voice hardened. To rebuild after our colonies burn. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Thalrix's scales shifted through a complex pattern: surprise, calculation, and something darker. Ah, yes, the commander said slowly. The human fascination with past tragedies. Tell me, Cross, do you think your creative combat techniques would have saved Colony Sigma-7? The question hung in the air like a blade. Around the hall, beings who knew the name whispered to those who didn't. A failed colony, they said. Pirates. Total loss. Tragic but not uncommon in frontier space. No, Ethan said quietly, but his voice carried. Nothing could have saved them. Not when the attackers had inside information. Not when they knew exactly which defense systems to target, which shelters to hit first. Not when they were using classified Drakari military frequencies. The whispers stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. That's a serious accusation, Thalrix said, his voice dangerously calm. Do you have proof? I have questions, Ethan replied. Like why raider ships were using Drakari military encryption. Why their attack patterns matched Special Operations doctrine. Why the only surviving security footage shows scaled hands setting charges on civilian shelters. Footage that was ruled inconclusive by the investigation board. A board consisting entirely of Drakari military officials? Thalrix descended from the platform with predatory grace. Careful, human. False accusations against a superior officer carry severe penalties. Then court-martial me, Ethan challenged. Put me on trial. Let me present my evidence in a public forum. Unless you're afraid of what might come out. They stood face to face now. Drakari commander and human cadet. The space between them, charged with violence, barely held in check. You think you're clever, Thalrix said, low enough that only those closest could hear. Playing the victim, turning your weakness into some kind of moral superiority. But I know what you really are. Cross. A survivor who will say anything, do anything, to justify your existence. And I know what you are, Ethan replied just as quietly. A war criminal hiding behind regulations and rank. Thalrix's hand moved to his sidearm, then stopped. Every recording device in the hall was active. Every eye was watching. Instead, he smiled. An expression that looked wrong on Drakari features. You want justice so badly, then let's settle this properly. Tomorrow. Combat arena, full contact, minimal rules. You can use any human weapon from your history. I'll use traditional Drakari arms. We'll see whose philosophy proves superior. Commander, Vale interjected, moving between them. Academy regulations prohibit. Academy regulations allow for honor duels when properly sanctioned. Thalrix cut them off. I'm invoking that right. Unless Cadet Cross is afraid. Ethan felt the trap closing, but saw no way to avoid it. Refusing would undermine everything he'd built. Accepting might get him killed. But there was something in Thalrix's eagerness that nagged at him. The commander was too confident, too prepared. I accept, Ethan said, on one condition. Name it. Win or lose. The full records of the Sigma-7 investigation are released. Unredacted. Let everyone see what really happened. Thalrix's scales rippled. You assume you'll be alive to see them. Then you should have no problem agreeing. The commander considered, then nodded. Done. Tomorrow at dawn. Come prepared to die with whatever honor humans can muster. He strode from the hall, leaving chaos in his wake. Cadets erupted in discussion. Instructors huddled in concerned groups. And somewhere in the back, maintenance workers began taking bets. Lyra found Ethan in the crowd, her skin cycling through patterns of alarm. You can't fight him. Thalrix is a decorated combat veteran with 30 years of experience. He's killed dozens in honorable combat. I know. Then why? Because he made a mistake. Ethan started walking, forcing her to keep pace. He agreed too quickly. The records, the duel, all of it. He's not improvising, this was planned. Which makes it worse, he's prepared for everything you might do. Everything he thinks I might do, Ethan corrected. Based on what he's seen, what he's studied. But there's one thing he doesn't know. What? I've been holding back. They reached the archive center, where Ethan had spent countless hours researching. He pulled up files he'd accessed before technical manuals, historical documents, cultural analyses. The night before the demonstration with Serax, I found something, he explained. Fingers flying over the interface. A reference in an old Earth military journal. Something called the Berserker Protocol. Lyra's patterns shifted to confusion. I've never heard of it. Because it was classified and then buried. Deemed too dangerous even for human forces. He found the file, heavily redacted, but still partially readable. During our final wars, before first contact, human military scientists developed enhancement techniques, not cybernetic like the Drakari, but chemical, biological, designed to push human physiology past its limits. Enhancement drugs aren't unusual. These were different. They didn't make humans stronger or faster. They made us other, removed inhibitions, enhanced pattern recognition, eliminated pain response, turned soldiers into something that could fight past any injury, think around any strategy, adapt to any situation. Understanding dawned in Lyra's patterns. You're planning to use this? I've been using it, Ethan admitted. Microdoses, carefully controlled. How do you think I really beat Sarek's pure skill? I was reading micro-expressions he didn't know he was making, processing combat data at accelerated rates, predicting his moves based on electromagnetic fluctuations in his cybernetics. Ethan, that's... She struggled for words. That's insane. Enhancement drugs have side effects, especially experimental ones. I know the risks. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're so focused on revenge that you're willing to destroy yourself to get it. He turned from the screen to face her. My family is dead, Lyra. Murdered by a war criminal who's about to get promoted for it. If destroying myself is what it takes to expose him, then, what you die a martyr and change nothing. Her patterns flared with anger, and something else fear. The Alliance has weathered worse scandals. They'll classify the records, blame rogue elements, and continue as always. Your death will be a footnote. Maybe. Or maybe seeing a human take down their strongest warrior will make them think twice about what we're capable of. Or maybe, a new voice said from the doorway, there's another way. They turned to find Serax, standing there, still moving stiffly from yesterday's injuries. The Drakari warrior entered the archive, checking for surveillance before speaking again. I told you there was more to Sigma-7, he said. Now I'll tell you what. But first, you need to understand I'm risking everything by being here. Why? Ethan demanded. You were there. You participated. I followed orders. Serax interrupted. Orders I was told came from the highest levels of Drakari command. Orders that turned my stomach, but that I obeyed because I believed in the chain of command. Only later did I learn the truth. Which is, Sigma-7 wasn't targeted because it was successful. It was targeted because of what they found. Serax produced a data chip, holding it out. Ruins, pre-contact, evidence that humans had achieved interstellar travel before your ecosystem collapsed. Evidence that you were already adapting to survive without outside intervention. Ethan took the chip with numb fingers. That's impossible. The historical records were sanitized by multiple species, not just the Drakari. The galaxy's power structure depends on certain narratives. Humans as grateful refugees. The Alliance as benevolent saviors. What happens if it comes out that humanity was on the verge of breakthrough when we rescued you? That we didn't save you from extinction, but from evolution into something that might have challenged the established order. Lyra's patterns cycled through disbelief to horror. The entire foundation of human-alien relations is built on a lie, Serax confirmed. Thalrix doesn't know this. He thinks Sigma-7 was about eliminating an embarrassment humans, succeeding without oversight. But his superiors had other reasons. The colony was getting too close to rediscovering what had been hidden. Why tell me this? Ethan asked. Because tomorrow, Thalrix is going to kill you, Serax said bluntly. He's not just a veteran. He's enhanced with classified military augmentations. Strength dampeners that will make your berserker chemistry useless. Neural shields that will prevent pattern reading. He's been designed to counter specifically what you showed yesterday. You're saying I can't win. I'm saying you can't win fighting. But maybe you don't need to. Serax gestured to the data chip. That contains everything the real Sigma-7 files. The cover-up documentation. Communications between Alliance leaders discussing the human problem. Release it during the fight. Stream it to every network while the galaxy watches. Win or lose, the truth comes out. And you, Ethan, studied the warrior who'd helped murder his family. What do you gain? Redemption, maybe. Or just the chance to sleep without seeing the faces of children I killed on orders. Serax moved toward the door, then paused. Your mate fought well. Human. She held the shelter entrance for 90 seconds after taking lethal wounds. Long enough for 12 children to escape through the back tunnels. They didn't all die that day. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Survivors were hidden, protected by those of us with conscience, safe from those who would silence them. Serax met his eyes. Win tomorrow, and I'll tell you where. Die, and they stay hidden forever. He left before Ethan could respond, leaving the two of them alone with earth-shattering revelations. It changes everything, Lyra said quietly. If humanity was already reaching for the stars, then we're not refugees, Ethan finished. We're prisoners, kept dependent, kept grateful, kept from becoming what we were meant to be. He looked at the data chip, then at her. I have to fight tomorrow, but not for revenge anymore. For truth. For the future. For humans like those children who survived. For all the minor species kept in their place by comfortable lies. He managed a grim smile. Turns out, the instructor's challenge is bigger than either of us imagined. Lyra moved closer, her hand finding his. Then we'd better make sure you survive it. They spent the night preparing not just for combat, but for revolution. The data chip's contents were verified, copied, prepared for broadcast. Alliance communication networks were surprisingly vulnerable to someone who knew where to look. And Lyra's biosynthetic nature gave her access to systems purely organic beings couldn't touch. When the duel begins, I'll start the upload, she explained. 50 million beings will be watching the fight. They'll all receive the data simultaneously. Even if the Alliance tries to suppress it, some copies will survive. And Thalrix will realize too late that killing you won't stop anything, that he's been a pawn in a game bigger than his prejudices. Ethan prepared his weapons, not just the quarterstaff, but items that told the story of human adaptation. A sling that could have been David's. A handful of caltrops that wouldn't have been out of place in medieval Japan. Simple tools that had let a fragile species conquer a world, then reach for the stars. The berserker drugs, Lyra asked. No, Ethan decided. Sarax was right. Thalrix will be prepared for that. I need to be something else. Something he's never faced. What? Human. Just human. No enhancements. No advantages. No tricks he's expecting. Just the pure, stubborn refusal to die that got us this far. Dawn came too soon, painting Borealis 3's sky in shades of amber and gold. The arena was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens throughout the academy. The greatest military minds of 20 species had come to watch a human with primitive weapons face a Drakari commander in his prime. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a revolution. Ethan entered the arena, carrying history itself. The quarterstaff across his back, the sling at his hip, small pouches of simple tools that had let humanity survive everything from ice ages to nuclear war. Thalrix waited in armor that seemed to drink light, covered in honors from a dozen campaigns. His weapons were traditional, but perfected a plasma sword that had been in his family for generations, neural whips that could paralyze with a touch, scales artificially hardened to turn any blade. Last chance, human, Thalrix called out. Kneel, apologize, accept your place, and I might let you live. My place, Ethan replied, voice carrying to every microphone, is standing, as humans have always stood, against predators, against nature, against anyone who thought we were prey. Then you'll die standing. Maybe, but I'll die human. Can you say the same? Or are you so enhanced, so modified, so dependent on superiority that you've forgotten what it means to be Drakari? Thalrix's scales flared. Begin! The commander moved faster than any natural being could, crossing the distance in a heartbeat. But Ethan was already gone, rolling aside and coming up with the sling whirling. The stone caught Thalrix in the shoulder, not penetrating his armor, but disrupting his balance. Primitive weapons, Thalrix snarled, recovering instantly. Effective weapons, Ethan corrected, already moving again. The battle that followed would be studied for generations, not for its technical excellence or honorable conduct, but for its sheer, desperate humanity. Ethan fought like every human who'd ever faced a superior foe, with cunning, with desperation, with the absolute refusal to accept defeat. He used the caltrops to control space, forcing Thalrix to move where he wanted. The quarterstaff became shield and spear, buying precious seconds. When the plasma sword finally shattered it, Ethan fought with the pieces. When those were gone, he used the arena itself, sand in the eyes, his own blood to make surfaces slick. And all the while, invisible to the combatants, data flowed across the galaxy's networks. The truth about Sigma-7, about humanity's stolen future, about lies that had shaped civilizations. Thalrix, for all his enhancements, began to slow. Not from injury, but from frustration. Every technique he'd mastered, every advantage he'd cultivated, meant nothing against an opponent who simply refused to fight properly. "Stand still and die with dignity," he roared. Die with dignity. Ethan laughed, blood running from a dozen wounds. Humans don't die with dignity. We die clawing, biting, taking our killers with us. We die buying one more second, one more breath, one more chance for someone else to live. That's when the arena's screens flickered. Not with the fight, but with images from Sigma-7. Documents scrolled past. Communications played. The truth laid bare for 50 million beings to see. Thalrix's concentration shattered. What? It was the opening Ethan had been waiting for. Not fighting to win now, just to survive long enough for the truth to spread. He rolled between Thalrix's legs, came up behind him, and wrapped his arms around the commander's throat in the most primitive hold known to combat a choke. Enhanced or not, Drakari still needed to breathe. "The truth," Ethan gasped in Thalrix's ear as they struggled. "It's out. Everyone knows. You killed my family for a lie." Thalrix threw himself backward, slamming Ethan into the ground. The impact broke ribs, drove air from lungs, sent lightning through nerves, but Ethan held on. Because that's what humans did. They held on. The arena erupted in chaos as beings realized what they were seeing on the screens. Shouts in a dozen languages, calls for answers, demands for justice. And in the center of it all, a human and a Drakari locked in the oldest form of combat, while the galaxy's comfortable lies crumbled around them. The chokehold lasted 17 seconds. 17 seconds where time stretched like molten glass, where 50 million beings held their breath, where the galaxy's comfortable lies shattered like the quarterstaff Ethan had wielded. Then Thalrix broke free. The Drakari commander's enhanced strength finally told, neural implants overriding oxygen deprivation long enough to drive an elbow into Ethan's broken ribs. The human rolled away, gasping. Blood painting the arena sand in patterns that looked almost artistic under the triple suns. "You think this changes anything?" Thalrix wheezed, struggling to his feet. Around them, the arena screens continued their relentless revelation documents, recordings, proof of humanity's stolen destiny. "The Alliance will contain this, classify it, deny it." "Maybe," Ethan managed, using the arena wall to pull himself upright. "But seeds of doubt, once planted, grow in darkness. Every human who sees this will wonder. Every minor species will question. Every comfortable lie will need defending. Then, I'll give them a truth to remember." Thalrix retrieved his plasma sword, its energy field flickering unstably from the combat. "The truth that humans die just like any other species when you cut them enough." He advanced with predatory purpose. No longer the honorable warrior, but a cornered predator protecting its territory. Ethan had no weapons left, no tricks remaining, nothing but the stubborn refusal to fall that had carried humanity from caves to stars. "Commander Thalrix, stand down." The voice boomed from the arena's speakers, Instructor Vale, their light form blazing with unprecedented intensity. "This duel is suspended pending investigation of the broadcasted materials." "No," Thalrix snarled. "Honor demands completion. He challenged my truth, I'll answer with his death." He lunged, plasma sword leading. Ethan tried to dodge, but his body betrayed him, too damaged to move with its usual speed. The blade scored across his shoulder, sending him spinning to the sand. That's when the maintenance workers moved. They came from the crowd in a wave, humans and Volans and Threnodi, and a dozen other species considered non-military. They carried their tools like weapons, forming a barrier between Thalrix and his prey. "Stand aside," Thalrix roared. "This is a matter of honor." "No," said Marcus, the human janitor who'd cleaned these halls for 20 years. "This is a matter of truth, and we've heard enough." The crowd stirred, Not just the maintenance workers now, but cadets, instructors, even some of the visiting military officials. They didn't attack Thalrix, they simply stood witness. Their presence a judgment more damning than any tribunal. You want to kill him, Kor's massive form pushed through the crowd. Then you go through us, all of us who've learned what strength really means. Strength. Thalrix's scales flickered through patterns of rage and disbelief. You call this rabble strength? We call it unity, Lyra said, appearing at Ethan's side, helping him stand. Something you'll never understand. You see species, hierarchies, genetic superiority. We see people. The arena screens shifted, no longer showing historical documents, but live feeds from across the galaxy. Demonstrations on 100 worlds. Humans and their allies demanding answers. The comfortable order of centuries cracking under the weight of revealed truth. This is what you've done, Thalrix said to Ethan, his voice hollow. Chaos, disorder. The end of everything stable. The end of lies, Ethan corrected. The beginning of choice. Let species decide their own futures instead of having them decided by those who fear change. Change. Thalrix laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you've unleashed. The Alliance exists because species agreed to limitations. Because we chose order over chaos. Without that, we evolve, Vale interrupted, floating down to arena floor. As we were meant to. As humanity was evolving before we intervened. The revelation that Vale knew, that they'd always known, sent new ripples through the crowd. The instructor's light form shifted to patterns few had ever seen, shame mixed with resolution. You were part of it, Ethan said, understanding dawning. We all were, in our way. Each species had reasons to fear what humanity might become. Your adaptability, your stubborn refusal to accept limitation, your ability to find strength in what others saw as weakness. You were chaos incarnate to our ordered galaxy. So you caged us. We thought we were saving you. From yourselves. From the pain of growth. From the chaos of becoming. Vale turned to address the arena, their words carrying to every screen, every ear. But we were wrong. Growth requires pain. Evolution demands chaos. By trying to preserve what was, we prevented what could be. Thalrix's plasma sword finally failed. Energy dispersing into harmless light. He stood among the ruins of everything he'd believed, scales dim with defeat. You've destroyed us all, he said to Ethan. When the Alliance fractures, when order collapses, when species turn on each other without the bonds of hierarchy, the blood will be on your hands. No, Ethan said quietly. The blood is already on yours. 300 souls at Sigma 7. Thousands more across the decades, wherever people dared to exceed their assigned limits. That blood demanded justice. Justice. Thalrix spat the word. You wanted revenge. Don't dress it in noble clothes. I wanted both, Ethan admitted. But somewhere between breaking that mop handle and standing here bleeding, it became something more. It became hope. Security forces finally entered the arena. But uncertainty marked their movements. Who did they arrest, for what crimes? Under whose authority the comfortable structures of power were crumbling, and no one knew what would replace them. Commander Thalrix, the security lead announced, you're under detention pending investigation of war crimes related to Colony Sigma 7. And him, Thalrix gestured to Ethan, the terrorist who destroyed galactic stability. The whistleblower who revealed corruption, the officer corrected, though that determination will be for others to make. As they led Thalrix away, he paused beside Ethan. You think you've won, but when the Alliance burns, when your precious humans are scattered to the cosmic winds without protection, remember, you chose this. I chose truth, Ethan replied. Whatever comes from that is what was meant to be. The aftermath was chaos, exactly as Thalrix had predicted. But it was productive chaos, the kind that preceded growth rather than death. Medical teams treated Ethan's wounds, while legal teams argued about jurisdiction. Diplomatic channels burned with accusations and denials. Some species withdrew their support from the alliance. Others demanded deeper investigation. And through it all, the maintenance workers stood guard. Not soldiers, not warriors. Just people who'd learned that strength came in many forms. The survivors, Ethan asked Serax, when the Drakari warrior visited him in medical. "You promised." "Already done." Serax produced a datapad. Coordinates to a safe haven. 12 children, now grown, who remember their parents' sacrifice. They've been waiting for the truth to come out. Ethan studied the coordinates, memorizing them. Why help them? Why help me? Because honor isn't about following orders. It's about recognizing when those orders are wrong. Serax headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Cross. I'm sorry. For Sigma 7. For all of it." "Sorry doesn't bring them back." "No, but maybe the truth prevents it happening again." Days passed in a blur of interrogations, revelations, and political maneuvering. The alliance didn't collapse as Thalrix had predicted, but it transformed. Species that had been content with their assigned roles began questioning. Humans across the galaxy stood a little straighter, spoke a little louder, dared a little more. "You started a revolution," Lyra told him one evening, her biosynthetic skin showing patterns of pride mixed with concern. "Not with weapons or warships, but with a broken mop handle." "The mop handle was just the beginning," Ethan corrected. "The revolution started the moment people realized that power isn't about strength or technology. It's about refusing to accept limitations others place on you." "So what now? The Academy is in chaos. Half the instructors have resigned. The other half are demanding complete restructuring. And everyone wants to know what Ethan Cross will do next." He was quiet for a long moment, watching Borealis 3's 3 suns paint the sky in impossible colors. "I need to find them. The survivors. Sarah and Maya are gone, but their sacrifice saved others. I need to see that it meant something. And then I teach. Not combat, everyone's learning that on their own now. But the other lessons, that survival trumps dignity, that adaptation beats strength, that sometimes the greatest victory is just refusing to fall. The Academy might not want those lessons. Then I'll teach them elsewhere, in maintenance bays and refugee camps, to anyone who's been told they're not strong enough, fast enough, advanced enough." He managed a smile. "Turns out there's a lot of us." Lyra's patterns shifted to something warm, affectionate. "Us. If you're interested, the galaxy's about to get very interesting. Old power structures failing, new alliances forming. Someone needs to help guide that chaos toward growth instead of destruction. And you think a bitter soldier and a biosynthetic tactical analyst can do that? I think 2 people who've learned to see strength in unexpected places might do better than generals and politicians who only see what they expect." She considered this, then nodded. "The transport to those coordinates leaves tomorrow. I've already booked 2 passages." "That obvious. You're many things, Ethan Cross. But subtle isn't one of them." Her patterns shifted to amusement. "Besides, someone needs to document this. The real story. Not the sanitized version the Alliance will eventually produce. The human who broke a mop handle in half. The human who broke the galaxy's comfortable lies. Though the mop handle makes a better title." They left the next morning, slipping away while the Academy still roiled with change. But their departure didn't go unnoticed. At the transport pad, they found unexpected witnesses: Kor, Marcus the janitor, the Volan's cadet who'd first spoken out, others who'd stood in the arena. "Thought you might leave quietly," Kor rumbled. "Wanted to say what you taught me, about seeing differently, fighting differently. I'll keep teaching it." "We all will," Marcus added. In our own ways, every species has those who've been overlooked. Now they know that being overlooked doesn't mean being weak. Ethan shook hands, accepted embraces, felt something he hadn't experienced since Sigma 7 community. Not based on species or strength, but on shared understanding that power came in many forms. As the transport lifted off, Lyra asked, "Do you think we really changed anything?" "Ask me in a generation," Ethan replied. "When human children grow up knowing they were never refugees but explorers, temporarily delayed. When minor species realize they were never minor, just measured by the wrong standards. When strength isn't about who has the biggest weapons, but who refuses to yield. And if Thalrix was right, if chaos destroys more than it creates, then we adapt. We survive. We find strength in the ruins and build something better." He pulled out a small object, a piece of the broken mop handle, kept as reminder. That's what humans do. That's what all overlooked people do. We take what's broken and we make it into a weapon, not for conquest, but for change. The transport jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward coordinates where survivors waited, where new chapters would begin. Behind them, the Academy continued its transformation, some embracing change, others resisting, all forced to confront truths they'd preferred to ignore. The instructor had asked for a close combat demo. What he'd gotten was a revolution that started with a mop handle and ended with the galaxy's comfortable lies in ruins. But between those points, in the space where combat became philosophy and revenge transformed into justice, something more important had happened. Humanity had remembered what it was. Not refugees grateful for rescue, but survivors who'd turn anything into strength. Even a broken mop handle, even a shattered heart, even comfortable lies exposed to uncomfortable truths. The transport sailed through hyperspace toward an uncertain future. In the cargo hold, Ethan Cross sat with the woman who'd become his unlikely partner, planning for a galaxy that would never be the same. He still carried his grief, his anger, his loss. But now he carried something more. Hope, the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever wielded. And somewhere in the vast dark between stars, 12 survivors waited to learn that their parents' sacrifice had meant something. That the truth, like humanity itself, could never be permanently suppressed. It always found a way to survive, to adapt, to break free. Even if it took a broken mop handle to begin,